Morning, everybody. Welcome to our first webinar for a series of webinars that we're going to be doing to help support the forest industry and forest products manufacturing. We expect the webinar to be approximately 40 to 60 minutes in duration. And just so that you know, it will be recorded for future viewing. Today's webinar is on the importance of reporting significant incident failure potential events. And I'd like to first, before we start, go over a little bit of the logistics of your control panel that you probably see there. If you want to type a question into the questions box, we'll try to get to those as we're going through the webinar. But Troy, the presenter, will be pausing at the end of each slide to take a couple of questions. For those, raise your hand, and when you're unmuted, you'll be able to speak and ask your question. If there's any technical difficulties, we have Sue Reed from the BC Forest Safety Council helping us out, and if we lose connection, somebody will pick up the presentation until Troy can get back on. So I'd like to start off by welcoming Troy Withey from West Fraser. He'll be doing the first presentation of our first webinar in the series, and it's on SIFp is what we call it. I think at West Fraser they call it SIF. Troy has spent most of his life in northern BC. He has over 28 years in the forest industry and has a lot of experience in a safety role during that 28 years. So he started off serving out as a safety captain in the 90s and joined the safety committee. And in 2003, and became chair and second vice president of the PPWC Local 9. In 2005, he became a safety supervisor, worked in all three of Canfor's pulp mills, and after obtaining his CRSP in 2015, he became the corporate safety manager for West Fraser, overseeing the Canadian and US operations. I've been lucky enough to work with Troy in the Manufacturing Advisory Group, MAG, and we've all found Troy to be a dedicated safety professional, and he's very quick to offer his support whenever we need help. He's very knowledgeable about safety systems, and he's very passionate about improving the industry's safety performance. So right now, I'd like to welcome Troy.
Okay, let me know if you see my screen, Sue or Bill, and then we'll be ready to go.
Looks great.
Okay, all right. So welcome everybody and good morning. I think it is still good morning for most people. If we're in the BC area, there's possibly some people from the Alberta area. As Bill said, Bill, thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Troy Withey. I'm the corporate safety manager for West Fraser. Have been with West Fraser for approximately, well, a little over 5 years now. I'm very lucky to be with them and have a dedicated team of safety professionals that work with me, including one that I believe is on the webinar with me now, which is Lori Sretsky, who is our BC safety superintendent. I think she's out in Smithers right now. So yeah, so what we're talking about today is I'm really excited about sharing this. I guess it's almost a bit of a journey for us and how we got to serious incident fatality potential, or what you heard earlier, significant incident failure potential. And let me just explain what the difference is there. When this first came out, this new program, this new idea, which wasn't really all that new, but really based into a program, it was actually called serious incident fatality, and there wasn't even potential behind it. It was just SIF. So I knew through the MAG we put potential on the end of it, and since then we've changed it to significant incident failure. But because we started this very early process, we've always kept the name the way it was when it was first out there and didn't make the change. But I got to tell you, I remember right at the beginning when even ourselves back a few years back started this, we even debated, wow, that's a pretty, the name of that is possibly a little too negative, but we decided to stick with it at the time. So if you're wondering what the difference is, that is what it is. So that gives you a little bit of the introduction. Again, to myself, I've been with West Fraser for 5 years, or a little over 5 years, was with Canfor previous to that for about 23.5 years, and I forget how many years on the management side, but quite a few years on the production side as well. So spent a lot of time on the floor, worked my way, as Bill said, into being a safety captain, always dedicated to do safety, and then seen an opportunity to work within the union and the company on a joint health and safety role, eventually moving up into the co-chair. Absolutely was passionate about safety and educated myself while I was working as a shift worker, and eventually got all my accreditation and was lucky enough that a job came up with Canfor at the time and moved into a management position and then just moved around within the 3 mills, had some great opportunities around construction and big projects. And then eventually an opportunity came up with West Fraser, and what a great company, and I'm so pleased to be with them. So let me tell you a little bit about our journey of how we got to where we are now. But just a bit of an idea of me being a presenter, and what I'm hoping to do today is there's going to be times that I'm going to ask for questions. And I'll be honest with everybody, first webinar for me, not the first webinar I've listened into, but definitely the first webinar that I've hosted. I'm used to doing conferences, I'm used to doing training and being in front of crowds, but I'm sitting here looking at a computer screen. So this is really strange for me to be sitting on this side of the computer screen talking away to people I can't see, but I understand there's about 62 of us on this webinar today. So thanks for taking the time to hang out with me today and talk. So what I'm used to a lot of interaction. Like I'm used to looking in people's eyes and asking them questions and not letting them off the hook until we communicate with each other and share ideas and share stories. That's going to be a little different for me today. But I am gonna come around. My style of presenting and training is really about sense and meaning and asking questions why, and just really digging into why we do things and why we do the things the way we have, and why we should change things and move forward in different directions. And that's the way I communicate. So I am going to try to ask people why. There's a couple slides I want to get some feedback, and that's where, again, putting your hand up, and then Sue will let me know, and then I'll get your feedback on that. Plus, as we mentioned earlier, at the end of each slide, I'm gonna try to remember to slow down and allow people to ask questions. And if there's a couple questions that come at the end of each slide, I might answer those. There may be some times when those questions might actually be talked about later on in it, as so on. So that's who I am. That's how I'm going to present. I'm a bit of a storyteller, and what I mean is lots of experiences working in the industry, had lots of experiences working in the floor. I worked as a paper maker when I first started and then on a pulp machine in a warehouse driving forklift, even a little time in the woodroom driving heavy equipment before I became a power engineer. Spent lots of time as a power engineer, and had lots of events around me, participated in a lot of investigations, probably too many. So lots of experiences, and a couple of those I'm actually going to share with you because they're relevant to what we're talking about today. So let's get started. So my first thing is I just want to talk about a bit of an agenda so you get a bit of an idea about where I'm going here. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history of West Fraser, not just the history of West Fraser, but the history of what I've seen when it comes to investigations and reporting. I'm going to ask the questions on that second slide. I'm going to ask why we don't report. So think about that right now. Consider that in your head right now, why we don't report. What is the culture behind that? Then I'm going to talk about when we actually do get into, and when we made the change in West Fraser, how we actually did the change management part. We're change agents. I imagine everybody on the call, I'm predicting that we're all safety people or safety professionals. What we truly are is change agents. So we're trying to educate people and move programs forward. There's a huge change management portion there. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our change management process. And I'm going to tell you right now that back in 2017 when we started, we probably weren't as good at it as we are now. So I can see some room for improvement from where we were to where we could have been, where we could go now with it. A little bit considering change management was an explanation guide to how we perform change management. And then I'm going to show you a flow chart of how this whole SIF program feeds into our entire safety program now. This is the exciting part that I think you'll really, I'm hoping that you'll find it exciting as well, because the SIF program is not isolated to itself, but it's integral to our entire safety program right now. I didn't know that. When we first started getting into the SIF program, I didn't understand how integral it would be, but I'm going to be able to share that with you now. These are things that's exciting. This is why it's exciting for me, because when we started this and we got into this, we had no idea what we were into. We read the white paper, believed in it, but we had an understanding of what it was, but we had no idea of how it would affect our entire safety program. Then I'm going to actually show you some forms that we use. I'm going to show you how we enter every one of our SIFs into our safety management system, which is our computer system, which feeds a lot of other programs. I'm going to show you a daily report that comes out within West Fraser every day, which is actually one of the reports that goes out every day to every one of our VPs, every one of our CEO, all of our operations managers, all of our GMs, and as well as all of our safety resources, get this report every day from every SIF that happens in West Fraser. And just if you didn't know, West Fraser is across British Columbia, Alberta, and the US South, and we have 45 divisions, and we all share all of our incidents. That's a big thing because we certainly didn't do that in the past. Then I'm going to talk to you about some of the benefits. And again, it's what do we learn from SIF on a day-to-day basis, and a monthly basis, a yearly basis, some of the process changes and the culture change, which is really what the key comes down to. The biggest benefit for us is that culture change, and we'll get into that. So let's start with the history. So overall, the history, when I started in 2015, I was impressed. Overall, I thought, yeah, they've got a pretty good reporting system here and an investigation program, but no problem there. And I think a lot of us, when I start talking about this next thing, I want you to think into your own programs and reporting systems. But what I can tell you now, looking back at it, when I went into the safety management system and I started looking at some of the incidents that were in there, or the majority of the incidents, they were around injuries. They weren't exactly around near misses. There were some near misses. Don't get me wrong. There were near misses, but the majority of investigations that I found, and in the majority of the reportings, were all around injuries, especially recordable injuries. And again, a lot of our recordable injuries, as everybody knows, is very low severity. You know, a lot of the stitches, the prescriptions. So we had to report those, obviously, but you know, that's what they were made up of. A lot of the near misses were lacking, and some of the near misses that were in there were very low in, I would say, consequence and exposure as well. So again, what you saw in the program, if I was to go and look at it, I would see a lot of those near misses, or mostly the reporting would be around actual injuries or recordable injuries. And you got to ask the question right away. So where were the near misses, and why were we just reporting injuries? Why were injuries the most reported? So I'm going to ask, that's my first question. Sue, let me know if somebody raises their hand. Let me ask the question to the group that's out there right now. Why were just injuries the ones that were being reported throughout our system, throughout West Fraser? It was the majority of them were injuries. Is there a reason that injuries were the most reported? But what's the reason that near misses were not, and injuries, more importantly, why were injuries being reported? What was the main reason behind it? Okay, without knowing that, I'm gonna carry on. I'm gonna tell you this. In my experiences, we have to report injuries, right? We don't have a choice, but we have to report injuries. And when somebody does have a recordable injury, those have to be reported. So of course, those are gonna fill our program, okay? But unfortunately, like many other businesses, our near misses, including our serious near misses, those weren't getting reported, and not to the same thoroughness as in the divisional level, were reported up to the corporate level. So I'm going to give you an example of an experience that I used to have in one of the mills that I used to work for. I remember every morning I'd come into the mill, and I had a group that was called protection officers. And in the pulp mills, you would have full-time first aid attendants that worked as also your security, and they would work at the front gate. And when I came in the morning, I would ask the same question to my people. So what happened last night? What happened last night? And I would get, at the beginning, even for them, it was tough for them to report to me. It was almost like they didn't want to, but eventually they would tell me exactly what happened as far as either first aids, recordable injuries, but as well as any near misses that may have happened from the day before. And I would keep that. And then we would have a managers meeting first thing in the morning, I think about 8 o'clock. All the managers would get together, or 7:30 or whatever it was. And the first thing was always safety, which was fantastic. And they would go around the table and they would report safety first thing in the morning. But it was always this. It was always the first aids. And I like the fact that the actual departments actually reported on their first aids. But what we didn't hear was near misses. And I already knew in my mind, I had already been told about near misses, and sometimes pretty serious near misses. The point I'm getting at here is it would go around to the different team leaders or department managers, and they would talk about, no, it's all good, or else they had a first aid. And then I would say, well, hang on here. Did we not have a fairly serious near miss, or did we not have a near miss the day before? And I can still remember the look that I would get more often than not from the department manager. They would give me that look like, really? And then they would actually talk about it, and then it would come out. But it goes to my point. Why was that not even being reported within the mill itself? I'm not even talking up to a corporate level. I'm talking just to the mill itself. The department manager knew, but they weren't even reporting that in the morning meeting. And that speaks to, again, the culture of reporting incidents. I think it does. So, you know, for ourselves as a company in West Fraser, and oh, by the way, I'll tell you this as well. So even within West Fraser, I can still remember, and tell me if you don't, well, I guess you can't tell me, but relate to me here, that you don't have those times when you as a safety professional hears about an incident and you don't hear about it for 2 or 3 months after the incident. And how frustrating is that, right? How do you deal, how do you solve issues? How do you get in front of those? How do you be proactive in any way when you don't even know these incidents happen, and sometimes fairly serious incidents? And not only that, but even at a corporate level, when it was reported up to corporate, we weren't even sharing it amongst ourselves in the different segments. So an incident might happen in pulp and solid woods wouldn't hear it, or panels might have an incident, which is our plywood and MDF, and that incident didn't get related just even in the office here itself, which is unbelievable. So there was it wasn't as if they were holding it back from each other. There just wasn't that communication, that culture of communicating, you know, incidents, especially serious incidents. Eventually it would come out, but it was shocking that there was no program to make sure that happened. So again, for me, what that means is when I look at, and I can still remember this from way back in my joint health and safety days, is that, you know, I remember it's one gentleman named Brad Waddell had said to me that, you know, Troy, when we don't report near misses and we don't follow through with them, we're leaving that mousetrap left for the next recipient, is what it is. It's that mousetrap is sitting right there. Oh, by the way, that took me a while to figure out the mouse thing there, but there it is. So another example for you that I have to give, that before I go on to the why, and I'm hoping that we get some participation in my next question, please do if you can, is, and it's funny, I got this forklift up here because it was an incident that happened to me. I think I was working in the mill for about 2 years. I was working on a paper machine, and I know a lot of you out there probably don't know what it looks like on a paper machine. Maybe some of you do, but they're fairly, in a machine room, it's fairly large. You have these big cranes that go along the roof of the entire machine room. You're lifting these massive rolls off the end of this running machine. You got forklifts running all over the place. It's quite a busy area. And what had happened was a belt that ran a bunch of paper underneath the front end of the paper machine had broken. So we couldn't feed all this excess paper down the front. So they had called me in on overtime and to work with another fairly junior employee. And we were using the forklift itself to roll these big, huge paper into, and then taking it around to another repulper and shoving it down. But we had to go fast because we had to keep the machine running, and if we slowed down, the machine we'd run out of rolls and we'd have to shut the machine down. So we were hauling. That's the best way I can say it. We were going fast, and what I had to do as the forklift operator is I actually had to back into this very narrow area in front of the machine, roll up the paper, take it away, and go ahead. But what was on the forklift itself from another device that we used to use for doing call, whereas at the very top where you see the mast here, there was these little clips that we used to use as chain clips to clip on another bucket, which we weren't using at the time, but these clips were there. And as I was coming around the corner, I had this worker working with me in front of I think we called it the backtender shack. I came whipping through backwards, looking behind me the way I should be, and I kind of whipped around. And what I didn't notice was my mast, the clips on there accidentally clipped. And on these cranes, you have at the time they were pendulums that hung from this big wire that came all the ways down, and they were handheld pendulum that you held in your hands that were north to south, east to west, and up and down and so on. And that pendulum, the handle, the bottom of the pendulum, hooked on my mast, and I didn't know it. So I'm backing up as fast as I can, whipping around the corner. Thank goodness I had my seatbelt on. I kind of, all of a sudden, I realized my whole forklift starts to tilt forward. And I'm like, what's going on? And I kind of turned around, I looked forward, and my mast is exactly the way you see it right now, is as high as it would go. And what's happened is that, and the pendulum or sorry, not the pendulum, but the controls have actually hooked on, and they've raised that mast with no hydraulics because the wire is going all the ways up into the to the crane itself, and then all of a sudden the bottom handle rips away from the controls, and my mast, because there was absolutely no hydraulics in it, came crashing down to the ground. My forklift smashes down. But what happens to that, to the controls, is it takes this big swinging arc, as because it's way up in the air, and it comes swinging down. And the gentleman that was working with me, who was named Glenn, I won't give you his last name, Glenn, sitting there, and he's watching this thing come at him. He was stunned. It missed him by, I would say, 8 inches. Swung right by him and smashed right into the back tender shack behind him. And we both just sat there and looked at each other. Well, I think that's about as serious near miss can get. It was crazy. I'll never forget it in my mind. But here's what we did. So let me ask, well, I'm not going to ask, I'm just going to tell you what we did, and then I'm going to ask you the question why. So what we did was we immediately lowered the mast. We went and got some duct tape. We wrapped up that thing so that, because it was almost in 2 pieces, so we put it together. We looked around nervously, and then away we went again. And we just started going. We were just away we went. And that goes to the question. Now, I guess that would be in 1994, and I'm really dating myself now, but that really goes to this question. Do I report or not do I report, or do I not report? Why do employees, supervisors, superintendents, managers not always report near misses? I think that we need to answer that, and I really would like some feedback from people. Why don't we report? What are some of the reasons why the culture is in our industry, even today, or especially back then, but even today, what are the reasons that from an employee level to the supervisor to a superintendent and even mill managers, why are we not reporting these near misses? And I'm hoping somebody's got their hand up, and then Sue can unmute them and we can hear. Okay, so you've got a hand up, let's try one. Oh, there we go.
Troy, it's Dave Persick from Sinclair Group.
Hi there.
I think one of the large drivers is around how we as leaders respond to individuals when they do make reports. You know, a good example is, you know, an employee shows up at our door with a near miss in hand to say, hey, this has happened. And if our response historically has been, oh shit, not another one, then we're really sending a message to folks that we're not overly interested in hearing about another safety event. Whereas if we open the door and the conversation is along the lines, you know, is everybody okay? Are you okay? Let's go and have a look and see what we can learn from this event. And I think we open the door to get more reporting. But I think our historical approach has been one of, I don't have time, not this again, not another one. I don't have the resources to investigate it. So we actually closed the door down culturally to that level of reporting.
I absolutely agree. I 100 thank you for putting your hand up and contributing. I 100% agree. It's about the perception, what people feel is going to be the answer to reporting. And I heard a couple things there. I heard you say if there's the perception, and if you have the perception that this is a time event, it's going to take a bunch of time. Well, that's definitely one. But it's also, you know, if it's the workers' perception that you're, as leaders in companies, are going to look negatively towards these incidents, and and our perception of those people that have them is negative. Well, why would we do that? So that's a great one. That's thank you for mentioning those.
Another answer shared was that it's an embarrassment.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It is embarrassing, or we're looked upon as being, we're not good at what we do because we've had a near miss. Something's happened. Myself, like let's be honest with my own incident that happened. Why would I, as a new and young worker, which I was at the time, be afraid of being in trouble? Why would I be afraid of being in trouble? And in actual fact, if machinery had broken down and I was asked to come in and do what would be probably a high risk task, there should have probably been a fairly significant risk assessment done on that, some observations done on that, and so on. So if anything, it was just the opposite, but myself and the individual, because, possibly because we thought that we had damaged equipment, we were more concerned about getting in trouble and how that would look upon us instead of being able to feel like, what, we had an incident, we need to make sure that we report this incident so that it doesn't happen again. Is there any other comments about do I report or not, and why employees, supervisors, superintendent, managers don't always report near misses?
There are some other comments. Another one is near misses are not seen as serious, or the full potential of the risk is not known. Often get the comment, this type of thing happens all the time. I'd be forever filling in the paperwork if I was to report all of these.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting. I could look at that from two different angles, and that's, I think, what the person was mentioning is that's what the perception is from other people out there. I believe that's what the comment was, and I agree. That's what people's perception is that they do happen all the time, or they may happen all the time, but in reality, to that person, are they, or is that just their pushback on it? We have a pretty good idea from a West Fraser point of view of how many times they do happen. And if anything, I guess I could turn that around and say, is that a bad thing? If they happen, if you know that they happen and that you actually gathered that data, is that a bad thing? I don't think so. I think that's telling you something if those incidents are happening. And if we're just ignoring them and saying, we're not going to do an SIF, or we're not going to report them because they happen all the time, that's a scary thought. Right? So we know that these incidents are happening all the time, but we're making a decision not to follow through with them. Where if we did follow through with them, I think the answer would be we would be preventing those incidents from happening. Sue, any other comments or any other questions?
Ben has mentioned that I feel there is resistance to spending the time to report and investigate. Also, it seems some managers feel it's a reflection on their teams and departments.
Yeah, exactly. And with that comment, I'm going to do that. You know what everybody is saying, as us safety professionals and leaders in our companies, don't we all have this experience that, that a lot of people feel it takes too much time. They're worried about if it's going to be disciplined. But again, individual supervisors, even managers, are concerned of, how does this look to me? How does this look on my site if these incidents happen? It looks as a bad light. Maybe I'm going to be, maybe this is going to cost me somehow in my future. And then, you know what that is? That's just the culture that we've lived in. And somehow we have to change that culture. And for us, that was what we had to do. We had to understand that this was our culture as well. West Fraser had to come to the understanding that we had a culture of not intentionally, we were very good at safety, but we still had a culture of not openly reporting because the perception was amongst most of our people that there was negativity towards reporting one way or the other. So we came to that conclusion. We knew we had to do something about it. And you really got to ask yourself, the people that are on this webinar, is that possibly something that's happening at your company right now? So the next one I want to talk about is, I need to jump back a bit here and tell you of how we learned and where we went with this. And again, it was about 2016, somewhere in there. We learned there was some white papers that were going out there, and we started reading the white papers. We knew we were, I guess the way I would say it is, we had always decreased our safety, and I think a lot of the companies will look at from way back in 2010 all the ways to, even 2005 to where you were in 2015 to 16. There was a drop. We had flattened out on our MIR. medical incident rate. We had come to being fairly flat, and we were still having way too many serious incidences and serious injuries. Mostly serious injuries is what we were tracking, like I said. So those were a very big concern for us. So we were always looking for what is that next step. And when we read the white papers on the SIF program, I was probably the same as everybody. Well, we're just talking about reporting. We already got that. That's near miss reporting. Didn't really get the big picture, but we kept at it. We kept learning about it. And eventually we said, you know what, I think there's something here. I think there really is. And again, I get to show you where we went and the results of it. And from the bigger picture, that's the exciting part about what I get to do today. But as a company, the biggest portion for us now was to be able to convince our senior leadership, because it really, any program change has got to be a top-down process. Your senior leadership has to buy into it first. Absolutely. And then it has to, and so for our levels, we're talking about a CEO, and then we're talking about the VPs in our company. And then we have operation and regional managers, which generally have there's about 10 of them, and they all have about 4 to 5 different mills that they have under them. And then of course the GMs. So it's got to start at the CEO. I think there's a saying, if it's not important to your boss, it can't be that important to you. But if it's important to your boss, well, then you're pretty fascinated by that, right? And the good thing was with West Fraser is that our senior leadership was 100% in right off the bat. We brought it to them when we said, this is a program that we want to go, where it's going to be a lot of work. There was no question. It was, okay, how do we do it and how quickly do we do it? And we're very, very fortunate to have that in our company. And so away we went. So we knew, again, getting back to change management again, and maybe I should stop if there's any questions about that. If there's any comments or questions, I'm more than willing, because again, I got to stop, slow down here. I don't hear anything from Sue, so I'm going to keep going. So here comes the change management part. So again, now we have senior leadership bought in and said, yes, we want to do this. We agree with what you've brought forward. Let's move forward. So now we need to start educating everybody down the line and making sure it's a top-down process. So it had to be a consistent message across, and we had to get people, again, the sense and meaning of just exactly what we're doing today on this thing. We had to convince our employees to know that it was a good thing, that you're reporting incidents, because overall in our company, this is going to benefit everybody, because we're going to learn from these incidents and we're going to be able to put programs in place. It's not about punishing you or looking down on you if you have an incident, but it's a positive thing. It needed to be a positive thing that you were reporting it. So, so we did this as far as we put out some documentation, which I'm going to share with you again. We did safety seminars, and we were consistent just over. And when we did hear of any incident, we immediately looked at it as an SIF and pushed back to the business and used that as a way to educate the division. Hey, that was an SIF. So maybe we didn't get the immediate reporting that we wanted to, but we had to backtrack on some and say, you know, that incident you had, that was an SIF. That was definitely an SIF. So let's go back, follow the process, and make sure. Okay, and we had to get that, again, like I said, the support from the senior management. Also, not just the why and the sense and meaning, but also there's the who, what's, where, when, and how, the actual pieces of the process and how to do it. That was a significant piece that we had to do as well. So here are some of those pieces that I'm referring to. One of the things that we put out to everybody across our entire business was an instruction guide. And again, a little bit on the sense and meaning. Why was the SIF program developed? And there was a little bit of an explanation to everybody right there at the beginning on why we needed to do this and why it was so important. We also put out some instructions for SIF determination form and how to fill out the form and how to actually put it into our safety system, as well as what happens after an SIF has been completed and what's going to be the process after that. And again, a lot of people were fairly nervous on what's going to happen. If I report this, what's going to happen? And soon they learned that, okay, no, this is a good thing. And all the pieces that we're going to do afterwards are all beneficial to not to our business, but to the entire business. So not just our division, but to the entire company. Then we also put out what it was called an explanation and examples. So what we did was we took all the high-risk activities that were in an SIF that we identify as an SIF, or those high-risk activities. We put an explanation of each of those items about what it would be. So if it was falls greater than 4 feet, what that looks like. And then we also put some examples in there as true examples that have happened within our divisions of an SIF in that high risk activity. And we put that out as well. And by the way, these instruction guides and explanations had to go out a few times. We had to be very consistent in the messaging, because if you just put it up and you think everybody's got it and walk away, you're not going to be there. It had to be over and over and over again until we actually felt like we got the hook in there, we've got everybody going, and now we can just keep following up with that consistent message. This is the part that I think I'm most excited about sharing with everybody. And this gives you, I'm going to give you more detail in a second about this. But after I get through this slide, Sue, if I forget, you stop me. And so this is a bit of a flow chart on how the SIF works for us. And I'm going to jump around a bit. But so we have an SIF incident. One of the very first things that should happen, of course, once the incident is safe, or the scene is safe, is that we're going to go back into our safety management system, and we're going to enter that into the system where we actually have a tab that has the high risk activities, and as well as the potential or the actual injury goes into that. From that what happens is, what we also do is we fill out a separate SIF form. It's a PDF fillable form. Eventually, we're going to make it so our safety management system automatically digitally does this, so it's all in one. But for now, we actually do have a separate form that we ask them to fill out, and I'll show you a page in detail a little bit more on this. That immediately gets sent to the senior management group, and who that would be the VP of that segment, also the safety manager of that segment. So like Lori, I was referring to, is in Smithers today, as well as myself, the operations manager. And they would get that immediately. They would be able to see that. So that's what's happened. So there's that open communication right away. Hey, we've had an incident. This is what's happened. Then what happens is, lots of times that the senior manager group will say, you know what, there's a lot of information there that's very important for all of us to learn immediately, and we will put together a safety bulletin. By the way, I just sent out another safety bulletin, or sorry, I sent one out yesterday. I'm going to send out another one today that Stan, our Alberta safety superintendent, just finished with one of our divisions in Alberta. That will go out today. And what that safety bulletin is a brief description of the incident, a couple pictures, and what the division is doing about it. But it's a great way of communicating what happened to all the divisions, and that gets sent out to all the 45 divisions. At the same time as all this is going on, of course, we're getting into investigations right away, and we're going to investigate, and all of our SIFs get an RCA investigation, and that methodology of how you do RCA is maybe different amongst the different businesses, but we do a root cause analysis for every SIF. And from that, what can happen is we may build a hazard alert as well, which is just one more level. So if it was something that happened at that division that we feel we can make a change for every other division, and there's going to be actions that every division we need to do, it would just not only go into a safety bulletin, but it would also go into a hazard alert where there's mandatory actions for every division. So not just communication, but hey, again, it happened, and we need all of our divisions to make this change. And again, goes out to all the different divisions throughout ours. And then, by the way, we track every one of those mills. We just track all the actions from these mandatory actions to make sure that we actually follow through on them. Another piece that happens is every day when this safety management system is entered in, the SIF, every day an SIF report comes out, as well as a recordable incident report. So every recordable incident we have across West Fraser, every day of the month, a report will come out, and it'll show all of our recordable injuries with the latest one at the top. But it also, right beside it, another PDF is called our SIF daily report. And every SIF throughout our company, as soon as they come in, go on top, or they're the very top one on the daily report. So this is looked at by all of our divisions. They look at this, they open it up, and they see what is the latest SIF, and they can look, again, get brief description and understanding. This communication helps the culture. It helps the culture when people can see across all of our divisions that, you know what, people are reporting these incidents do happen across all of our divisions. It's okay, and we're going to do something about it. But they get to see that from a day-to-day basis. It also opens up the communication between all of these different mills. We know now that divisions have no problems calling each other and say, hey, I see that yesterday you had a fairly significant SIF. Can you tell me more about that? what is it that you did differently, or what should, you know, and that comparison back and forth between our different divisions, is that open communication is such a difference in our culture. As well, the incident there, our safety management system will also tie into what's called we'll track all those on a monthly basis. It goes into another program that many of you might be using. It's called Power BI, where it reaches into our safety management system, pulls out all the data, and then we can look at that data. And that's very important for predicting what is it that we need to work on, what is it we need to focus on with West Fraser, and to be a better company, to make things safer for our employees. And I'll get into that in a bit as well. Before I move forward, and you can see and remember I talked about at the beginning of this thing, it's SIF is so integral to our entire safety program now. It's so important. It's changed our culture about who we are, because now we're not concerned about not reporting it. It's more about, should we be reporting this? Like that lots of times I'll get the calls into my office now is, hey Troy, we had this incident. Should we call this an SIF? That's where we want to be, right? Instead of finding out 2 months later or 2 weeks later that there was a fairly significant incident that happened at a different division.
Troy, it's Bill here. I just wanted to quickly mention that both West Fraser and many of the other companies in the MAG group send us these safety bulletin and hazard alerts, and we send them out as the safety alerts of the week. So you not only communicate within your own organization, you're communicating to the industry as a whole.
That's a great call. And Bill, I'm guilty. I've got a few I've got to send you. so maybe that was your reminder to me as well. So you're absolutely right. We do. And just so everybody knows that I send them to Bill. Bill takes names and company names, and they just become an overall incident throughout the industry, and they go out. So thank you for mentioning that, Bill. So great example. So now we're having these incidents. We're not just reporting them amongst our divisions, but we're actually reporting them across all divisions in all companies. Isn't that the idea? It's overall, it's to make things safer for all employees, for all people. And for us, it's just increased that exponentially. Any other comments or questions at this point before I go further? So I mentioned this report that has to be filled out. This is what it actually looks like here. And by the way, we certainly don't mind sharing information with people. That's what we do with the BC Forest Safety Council and with MAG, is we're about helping each other. There's no secrets here. So we're more than happy to share information, but this is the report that we built. And again, it's a PDF, fillable PDF. And eventually we would like this one to be automated so that it could be built out of the safety management program that would just automatically send it. But for now, we have to attach it to an email, and it makes sure that it gets directly to the appropriate managers. And again, a brief description of the incident. This is actually one that's why I've taken these boxes out, because this actually did happen at one of our locations. You can see we've marked down what the actual high risk activity is in here. And then what we actually do is then we put the potential. So by the way, when it comes to this is something that's a learn for us. When we first put these out, lots of people would mark just everything that they thought it could be as far as an injury. And if there wasn't an injury, it should be just potential serious injury. That's what it should say, instead of marking all of these different ones of what they think it could possibly have been. We try to make sure that in this box, I've shown you one that's 3. The reason I did that is we try to push back lots of times and make sure that we're not checking more than one box, but sometimes it will be 2 different boxes that relate, but most of the time it's just one box. So again, immediately filled out, sent to the appropriate managers. And then again, if it's serious enough, and of course, if it's serious enough, and if it's overly serious, and this, by the way, and we've got feedback from our senior managers, is that they receive calls a lot quicker now, because a lot of them don't want this to be the first time their senior manager hears of it. So those calls come in fairly quickly, and then this will follow along with it. But again, great way of communicating to the senior management immediately. This is our safety management system here, where again, you'll see that the same boxes here are built into our safety management system, which is our computer-based safety management system. They go into the box there, they click in these, and as soon as they hit enter, it does a couple things. It goes to that daily report that I'm going to show you on the next slide, but it's also fed into our Power BI, which is tracking all of our incidents for us and letting us know. So the next one, this is the daily report that I was telling you, and you can see I took this off the top of the email where it shows the daily report, so the daily recordable report, but also the daily SIF. And if you open up either one of these PDFs, you'll get that report. You can see for us, this is the SIF report here. I shouldn't show it in too much detail, but you can see that, you know, all of our different divisions, and even our woods divisions are part of our SIF program now, and actually doing a fantastic job of being part of that reporting structure now. New Boston in the States, our pulp mills, everybody is part of it. And again, if you have an incident, when you open up this report, always the latest one always goes to the top. So when you go in, you can see in this 1 month, there's been 13 pages of different incidences that have been reported into the system. So a total of 50 on this incident at this point in the month. And then, so if you're watching them, with most people do, they open it up and they know from the last one they read the day before, they can see the ones that were listed on the top are the ones they hadn't seen before. So again, you can kind of get a bit of an idea of how we report out on a daily basis. Any questions about that have come up, or comments? So then I mentioned earlier as well that we do investigate all of our SIFs to root cause. So we do a root cause. Now, when you say root cause investigation, you know, I don't want to make it sound like we're pooling in all the corporate resources. If, you know, depending on the incident, we will sometimes send out people to, again, if the severity is and consequence exposure is quite high, then we will send out one of our safety managers to work with the division to investigate even a little deeper. But our divisions are fairly good at their investigation, so we generally are okay with what they come up with. But that investigation also, when there's an SIF, generally the responsible manager or regional manager will ask for the investigation as well, and we'll review that as well. So again, whatever your methodology is, if it's a 5Y or if it's fishbone or whatever it is, that's what you would do. For us, by the way, it's generally mostly 5Y. And again, part of our program is the actions that we put into our investigations. We track all of those actions, and they're what we call a leading indicator. So at the end of every month, West Fraser looks at all the actions from the divisions and sees if they actually have completed the ones that they said they were going to, as well as make sure that all the investigations were done within a month. That's a leading indicator for us. I mentioned before our safety bulletins and hazard alerts. This is just a bit bigger of a view, but you can see that when we put a safety bulletin out, it's just to get, again, it's just an information bulletin. We want to get a little bit of a picture so that people can get a view and see what's happened, a description, and what is the division itself doing. And then if it's fairly serious and the management group has said, you know what, we need to make changes across the board, across West Fraser, then we put out a hazard alert, and with those come mandatory corrective actions so that every division is required to make the changes in their divisions on those, or whatever the equipment is or the programs are. And again, those are tracked as well. We make sure that those are all tracked to completion as well.
We had a question from one of the participants who wants to know how long it took to actually implement this throughout your organization.
Started in 2017. So started in 2017, and I will say this, it didn't all happen at once. That's the benefit of seeing this now. This has grown with us as far as, you know, tracking the SIFs like what I'm showing you now, how we've related hazard alerts and safety bulletins. This is all growth that we've done over the last 3 years. So we started in 2017, and again, at the beginning, you know, I can still remember we would have, I think, to give you an example, when we started, I think we were getting around 10 or 13 SIFs in a month. We've had up to 100 in a month now. That's a pretty large number, and those were extraordinary month. But on average, I think we're at about 65 SIFs a month throughout our company. So that gives you a bit. So again, starting at the area of around 10 to where we are now, you can kind of see if that, and that was that change management piece again, right? About actually staying consistent and making sure that the message stayed consistent, educating people where we saw the opportunity, where we found out about something and being positive about it, and going back in our safety seminars when we brought people together, we talked about the importance of it, the sense of meaning behind it, And now I think we're at that point now where we feel comfortable that people know it's the expectation is now that you do report, that you must report. Like, I think basically everybody in our company knows now that if there's an incident, it will be reported as an SIF. So that's how long it took us from, we started in about the 2000, I'd have to go back to my original documents and emails, but it was somewhere in the area of 2017. And we're still expanding. We're still looking for ways of getting better at this program today. What you're seeing here again is just some of the stats that we were able to pull off, and you can see in a month for August across all of our divisions. And we'll, by the way, share all of our stats every month. We do a monthly report to every one of our divisions, and they all get the same report all the ways up to the CEO, all the ways into each of the divisions, and they can see what the SIFs. And again, it's about that sharing culture. As well as we break it down from our US divisions to our Canadian divisions, you can see how many we've had in the month or into the year so far. And I think we're somewhere at 627 or something else like that. And when I built this actual report here. So you can kind of see some of the major ones that are happening. Lockout de-energized is still happening, but I'll talk about that in a second. Lots of mobile equipment in our US divisions. The fire and explosions and mobile equipment are still big ones there, as well as spilled loads has been a huge one for us over the years, and ones that we focused on and made changes in our programs with.
Troy,
yes, go ahead.
Say it again. Can you go back one more slide?
To this one or the one before?
One before. There you go.
Okay.
Curious about the reference to mandatory corrective actions for all West Fraser divisions. So yes, you have a significant incident at one of your operations. They do an investigation. They come up with some corrective actions. How do you incorporate feedback from the other operations as to whether or not those corrective actions are meaningful? Because obviously across 45 divisions, you're going to have some different opinions around those actions.
Yeah, let me answer that for you. That's a great question. So it was one of the reasons that we actually built the safety bulletin, is because we realized in the past that our hazard alerts weren't being effective enough, and we weren't getting the results that we wanted. And the reason was possibly they weren't effective in all of the divisions, like the hazard itself or the recommendation wasn't accurate for all of it, especially if you consider West Fraser having pulp mills, MDF, panels, sawmills. Sometimes that equipment may not exist in other ones. So there's two things that we did there. The one thing that we do is if the equipment doesn't apply to you, and when we send out the hazard alert with the recommendations, we always put in the email, if this does not apply to your segment, you still must put in your actions, that you actually label it that it doesn't apply to yours, right? So that the operations manager can actually see that, yeah, you actually went in there and put the action in, but the action is that it just doesn't apply to your division. But what we also do is we make sure before we put out the hazard alert, this is why the safety bulletin, we needed to make sure that they were effective actions. And so the safety lead team are the ones that put these together. And then what we do is we vet this right through all of our operations managers and our VPs to make sure that they agree and they support the actions. And that takes time to make sure that we've got enough feedback. Sometimes it might take a month or two to make sure that we've got that if we're going to put mandatory actions in, that it's supported from the top down again, like we talked about. So then when they do go out, they're meaningful and they're going to be. But again, you're right. If there's a segment like a pulp mill may say, well, we just we don't have a trimmer. We can't do that. So in that case, they will put in there that this doesn't affect their segment because of this, or this. But because of the time it takes to get out the hazard alert, that was another reason that we said we must have another system to make sure the information gets out immediately. And that's why the safety bulletin is so effective, because again, not mandatory actions, but corrective measures, just what the division is doing. And we put in the email when we sent those out that these are not mandatory actions. This is a communication to educate your employees and your contractors. Does that answer your question?
It does. So I get the piece of vetting. It sounds like it's a vetting at the top or portion of the business. So before they become mandatory, how do you engage the broader workforce from the employee level up? in getting buy-in to these corrective actions?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think you've got to kind of make the determination at what point, how much feedback do you get? So like, I'll use the example when we build a new program, we don't just vet it at the corporate level. We actually send it out to all of our divisions so that they can vet it throughout their division and supply us feedback before we make it into a program for all of West Fraser. I guess the answer for the hazard alert is that we don't actually put it through all of the divisions. We where we've cut it off at is at the operations managers and the VPs and the lead safety team make the decision on mandatory corrective actions.
Okay, thanks.
That help?
Yep.
Perfect. Thanks for the question. I appreciate that. Sue, any other questions that I can answer before I carry on? Okay, well, I just got the last slides then, and we'll be done. So again, the benefits of the SIF, here's an excellent benefit right here. Something that we learned through our SIF program, this goes back a little ways, that our lockout de-energizing, we were having so many incidents, and a lot of our serious incidents were around lockout. So from this actually helped support a change that we made in West Fraser, that all of our Canadian divisions now do, it's mandatory and it's lockout verification. So it doesn't matter if it's one lock or if it's multiple locks, every lockout gets verified. And I can tell you from that experience that we've almost eliminated all serious injuries in our Canadian divisions around lockout. It's been a huge change, but again, was easily supported by our senior management by looking at our SIF incidents. We were able to use that as justification. It was a focus item for us. It kept coming up. Lori, who again I keep referring to, tracked it for us and showed us all the incidents and details, and of course our SIF program detailed it as well. The last one is the overall benefits. What this communication, this culture changes SIF has done is it's just made a large company smaller when it comes to communicating. Again, remember I told you that even in our office, we would forget to talk to everybody in the different segments. Now we all share the exact same information. If an incident happens, we're all aware of it right away, and we have good communication and good talk about it right away. And of course, it supports everything, like I said, the hazard alerts, the safety bulletins, and the communications amongst each of the different divisions. You know, like I said, in 2 to 3 years we've been working at it. We're not perfect at it, but we certainly have gotten much better at it, and we see the absolute benefit of the SIF program. And like I said, I mentioned it earlier, it's just an expectation. It's a known practice that when it's an incident happens and it's an SIF, people know what the definition of SIF is. It's an expectation and it just happens. It's easy to see, and it's been a huge benefit for us as part of our overall safety program. It just has fit in very well. I will answer any more questions that anybody has at this point, but I am so glad that everybody got on with me today so that you could hear about it. As I said, when we first got into this, I didn't know the benefits overall that were going to happen. We just didn't know. We knew that investigation near miss was important, but we didn't know the overall benefits until we can look back today. Go ahead.
We have one more question from Marla.
Hi.
Okay.
Would you be willing to share your verification program with us?
No problem. Just need to tell me who you are.
Marla Nickel from Conifex and Mackenzie.
Oh, hi there. Okay,
Hi.
yeah.
We're doing a similar program, CIR, it's our critical incidents, and we're finding the same thing with our lockouts, and we're getting a lot of reports of lockout incidences. So we're talking about going to a verification program, so I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, and relating back to SIF again, it was what supported, it made it so easy for us to go there because of our SIF program.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, we'll make contact and no issues. We'll send it to you. Any other questions? Well, everyone, thank you so much for sharing an hour of your time with me. I hope that it was an hour that was beneficial to you as a safety professional and the leaders in your company. Again, I'll say this again, when we first started looking at the program, we knew it was a good thing. We didn't realize it was going to be a great thing. For us, it's an integral part of our safety programs now, and we're just looking forward to getting better at it. So thank you very much. And by all means, if anybody wants to reach out and ask questions later on, I'm more than happy to answer any questions in the future, either by email or by chatting me up on the phone. It's all good. I'll be there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Troy.
So Troy, thank you very much for that great presentation, but I think it was well worth the time to spend to listen to the journey that West Fraser's gone through for the SIFP. Before we sign off here, one of the things, or a couple of the things I'd like to talk about is there's some handouts that you can access here. The Crew Talk of the Week for SIFP, a guide for the Crew Talks for supervisors, a poster for SIFP, and we also have hard hat stickers for reporting SIFPs if people are interested in those. As mentioned earlier, we do use a lot of the incidents from the various MAG members for our safety alerts of the week if you subscribe to those. And we also have Crew Talks of the Week that you can subscribe to. So we do welcome incidents from any company that wants to send them to us, and we will we'll sanitize them, making sure that there's no names or no company names, and we'll use those for the safety alerts. So once again, thank you very much, Troy, for your presentation. It was very informative, and for me, it was great to be able to hear how West Fraser worked through this process to get to where you are. And just the last thing is we do have another seminar coming up in December. It'll be our second one, and we'll make sure that everybody's informed of the registration for that seminar. So thank you very much, Troy, and everyone that participated.